is good to see you today. I want you to know that I bring for you the world's greatest sermon. Oh, it's not my sermon. It's Jesus' sermon, the sermon that we call the Sermon on the Mount. You may remember Matthew 5, 6, and 7. There'd been a fantastic crowd following Jesus. And he sat them down and he began to teach them. And those teachings form so much of what we remember and revere about what Jesus had to say. You remember the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And on about those who are blessed when they may not seem like they're living a life that is blessed. And then he starts to talk about the identity of the people who listen to him and follow him. He said, beginning in verse 13, you are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but it is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. That opening sentence of verse 14, you are the light of the world. That's a statement of identity and a statement of purpose for people who listen to Jesus and follow after him. It's interesting to me to hear him giving us an identity at this era in our history when identity is something that we argue about and misunderstand and have conflict over. Jesus is handing us an identity. It's not an identity that we have come up with from inside. It is an identity that he is giving to us. You, when you listen to me and follow in my way, you are the light of the world. I like to think of it like this. Jesus has called us to be darkness disruptors. I like that. Jesus has called us to be darkness disruptors. If you think about it from a purely scientific, technical law of physics point of view, darkness simply exists. If we turn the lights out in here, darkness will be the state of this room. But when we turn the lights on, the darkness flees. Darkness and light do not coexist. Darkness is the default, but when light comes into being, the darkness flees. And where darkness exists, it's only because light is absent. And where light exists, darkness cannot coexist. You can go into a deep, dark cave, and if you light a candle, the small, glowing light of that candle will still shine into the shadows of that cave. The amount of darkness in that cave, it simply cannot compete with the light of a single candle. Now, truthfully, a single candle cannot light up an entire cave, but if you carry that candle throughout that cave, wherever you carry the light, the darkness flees. It's interesting that Jesus chose that metaphor to describe you and me. He has called us to be darkness disruptors. He said a city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. You know, imagine going to the store and buying the most gorgeous lamp that you ever saw. And you bring it home, you unbox it, you put a bulb in it, you plug it in, you turn it on, you admire its beauty, and then you put it in the closet. Does that make any sense at all? To cover up light is an absurdity. You simply don't build a city on a hill and then proceed to hide it. It's a nonsensical idea. You don't light a lamp and hide it. You lift a light up high so that everyone can see. Light isn't meant to be kept. Light is meant to be shared. And Jesus went on to say, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Jesus calls us light of the world. He calls us to be darkness disruptors in the world. And for us to do any less, friends, it's just an absurd idea. Now, there are some biblical counterpoints that I think are interesting to consider. You know, in the very words of Jesus, too, just a few verses later in Matthew 6, Jesus said, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before others, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven." So doesn't that sound like we're supposed to do good in secret? Is that how you hear it? That our good deeds are supposed to be anonymous so that no one knows who did what? Is that how we understand it? Does somebody want to give me an amen? You're not sure, are you? You're skeptical for a reason, because I actually misquoted the text on purpose. It's a trick question. Here's what Jesus said in Matthew 6. "Beware of practicing your righteousness before others in order to be seen by them. For then you have no reward from your Father in heaven." Jesus is not teaching about the value of anonymity or about secret discipleship. He is calling us to examine our motivation. Do we do good deeds so that others will think highly of us? Or do we do good deeds in the name of Christ so that others might glorify God? Now, some people may ask, I'm not so sure about this stuff about good works. I mean, isn't following Jesus about faith? Isn't it about trusting Christ? Isn't it about belief? And it absolutely is. The Apostle Paul wrote in Ephesians 2, "It's by grace that you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God. It's not the result of works, so that no one may boast." It is about grace. It is about faith. It is about God's gifts. But there is a connection between faith and action, between believing and doing, that we must not miss. Paul went on to say in the very next verse, "We are what he has made us, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we may walk in them." I read someone this week who wrote, "Good works do not produce salvation. Good works are the product of salvation." Good works do not produce salvation. Good works are the product of salvation. In the book of James, which tradition tells us was written by James, the brother of Jesus, he put it even more bluntly. He said, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but does not have works? Surely that faith cannot save, can it? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill,' and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that?" So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. You may remember these contraptions that we put up in the lobby about a year ago. We have a picture there. We called them the Go Walls. They were, just a construction project where we had created a container for us to place markers, ping pong balls, in there every time we did something in service to Christ out in the world. Whether it was volunteering at one of our mission partners, whether it was going on a mission trip, whether it was doing a good, loving deed for a neighbor, perhaps preparing a meal for someone who had just gotten home from the hospital, anything that we did in the name of Jesus out in the world, we invited you to make a mark, to simply drop a ping pong ball in one of these. We had one in each lobby. It was kind of interesting when we got going well with this. The one in the main lobby was getting full faster than the one over here. And there were folks at the 9:30 service, they would come to me and they say, "Hey, we're doing better than them 11 o'clock folks, aren't we?" And I said to them, well, what you don't know is that we periodically mix them up. But you know what? That kind of competition is actually okay in my book. I think it's even biblical because the Bible tells us outdo one another in showing honor. So outdo one another in serving Christ. That's a great way to be competitive. Outdo one another in loving your neighbor. That's an awesome biblical and wonderful kind of competition. Again, the concept of these was just that every time you served Christ out in the world, you drop a ping pong ball. And if you serve somewhere for like an 8-hour day, which some of our folks have done, then put 8 markers in there. It was kind of an act as an hour, roughly. It was just kind of an estimate. We weren't trying to be thoroughly analytically precise with the data. We were painting a picture. Well, you know, we constructed them, engineers that we are, to try to hold about 10,000 ping pong balls each. But about 3/4 of the way through last year, we noticed that instead of the balls raising higher and higher, it was bowing outward. And the plexiglass began to pop loose. And we learned 2 very valuable lessons. One is, if we're going to try to measure the commitment to service of the people of Peachtree City United Methodist Church, don't underestimate what they're going to do. Because folks, y'all busted the goal walls. The second thing we learned was buy better plexiglass. I just want to highlight and celebrate a few people for their acts of service. They did not know I was going to do this. Once some of them saw it at 9:30, they did not like me for doing this. But you know, these are folks that inspire me, and I want to celebrate. I want to glorify God because of what God does through them in the life of the world. The first one is Miss Peggy Wilder. Peggy volunteers at the Clothes Closet at Real Life Center. That's one of our mission partners. Peggy has been serving there for 6 years. Now, Peggy was at 9:30, and when this picture went up, she crawled on the floor and hid under the chairs because Peggy is someone that wants zero attention for what she does in the name of Christ, but she serves faithfully, regularly, and she's making a difference in the world. A few weeks ago, we had several folks that are emergency response trained travel to Griffin. Let's show that next picture, please, to help clean up after the storms. You know, this was one of those times where those who have been through the emergency response training will get an invitation to come and to serve. Now, this particular event was kind of a no or low risk scenario, so they didn't insist that everyone is badged. Sometimes those kind of opportunities come along, but we just had about a half dozen folks get together with, as you see, a tractor and some chainsaws and rakes and shovels to help clean up and remove debris from a woman's lawn. Again, serving Jesus out in the world. And last November, we had several of our students, along with dozens and dozens of our church members, go to the Basher Homeless Men's Shelter. This particular night, our students went to prepare meals and serve those meals and have some fellowship and conversation with the men who are being cared for at that shelter. Friends, these are just 3 examples out of the multitude of examples that I could have chosen to share with you today. It's just a tiny, tiny, tiny sampling of all that you have done in service to Christ over the past year. There's no way that I could honor and celebrate everyone because the truth is there's far too many for us to stay here and do that unless you'd like to stay till about 4 o'clock today. Even more, there are people that serve that I still don't know about, that nobody knows about. They came by and they dropped their ping pong ball and they just went on without saying a word. And I also know there was lots of ministry that was done that nobody ever bothered to pick up a ping pong ball. They served, they just didn't engage in this project. So the truth is we way overshot, I believe, our goal of 20,000 acts of service. But I can't know for sure because I'm not touching the wall because it might hurt me. I want to introduce you to our special guest today. Pat Burke is the executive director at Midwest Food Bank. Pat has over 30 years of corporate leadership experience, most recently serving as the group president for the Clearwater Paper Corporation. He has been on the team at PepsiCo, Quaker Oats, and General Mills. Pat is an original resident of Peachtree City, and I do mean original resident of Peachtree City. And after traveling around the country and our world for work and other purposes, he is back in Peachtree City with his wife Tracy, and they have 2 adult children and 5 grandchildren. While Pat makes his way to the platform, I'm going to ask you to give your attention to the screens.
Did you know approximately 10% of people in the United States experience food insecurity each year? Food insecurity doesn't always mean you fall within the poverty line. Many times it has to do with the sudden unemployment, or having a hard time finding a job, or not having a local support system during your time of need. But that's why we are here. We are your support. Midwest Food Bank here in Peachtree City provides more than meals. We provide hope. Our fleet of trucks and team of volunteer drivers pick up food from across the country, allowing us to rescue large quantities of quality food. You know, the Midwest Food Bank does serve over 230 agencies, over 150,000 people. As a faith-based organization, we share the blessings and share the love of Jesus Christ through the gift of food, with one volunteer at a time, and with one food truck at a time, and with one meal at a time. That's how Peachtree City Midwest Food Bank will change the world.
Friends, would you welcome Pat Burke?
Thank you.
Pat, thanks for being here today. I know you're a very busy fella. Pat is not only the executive director of our Midwest Food Bank Georgia right here in Peachtree City, but he's also taken on the responsibilities of the chief operating officer for the entire national organization. So Pat's time is valuable, and we're blessed that he gets to be here with us today. Pat, if you could, just give us that 2-minute elevator speech for what Midwest Food Bank is all about, beyond what that video showed us.
Thank you, Sean. And first of all, thank you for the invite, and what a beautiful facility and congregation you have, and congratulations on busting through the plexiglass. The Midwest Food Bank, the first question I usually get is, what's the name all about? What does that have to do with Peachtree City and where we serve? Back in 2003, David Keyser, the founder, farmer in Bloomington, Illinois, 8th grade education. He's reading the paper and sees his community is in need of food. He has this old machine shed. He starts storing food in there for about 8 agencies. And now here we are in 2023. We have 10 divisions, 2 international, Nairobi and Haiti, and we'll probably be close to $450 million worth of food distributed this year for free. So it's just amazing what David Keyser's plan was, and he thought Midwest Food Bank name would be huge. Could never achieve that, and God's plan was something obviously much larger and much greater than that. Peachtree City specifically, we will do about $38 million out of this facility here that we distribute for free. 7 million or so meals, and none of that's possible without, we have about 4,000 or so volunteers that come through those doors. So it's just an amazing place.
When you talk about $38 million worth of food passing through Midwest Food Bank Georgia, how do you arrive at that value? Where does that come from?
So we have great relationships with several manufacturers. That could be Kellogg's, it could be Quaker Oats, and et cetera, Delta Airlines, and so they will donate food to us, and the value of that food is what you would have to go pay for retail off the shelf. They'll call us and say, "Hey, Pat, we've got a load of cereal. Can you come pick it up?" And we've got that equipment, the tractor trailers, and we have volunteers then that will go pick it up. That cost us about $500, diesel fuel, food for the driver, et cetera, to go pick that food up. On average, a tractor trailer worth of food is about $110,000. So that's a pretty good investment when you think about $500 to go pick it up for $110,000 worth of food.
So 4,000 volunteers, give or take.
Yeah.
Tell us what those volunteers look like. What kind of people come to volunteer at Midwest Food Bank?
Well, so there is no one model, of course, for what they look like and the volunteers that come. So we had a lady a few weeks ago. She showed up with a papoose, I think you call it, with a little 2-month-old baby in it. I mean, teeny tiny little thing, but volunteering all the way. On the other end of the scale, we had a volunteer. His name is Herman, 96 years old, I think he is, and this guy works on the loadout weeks where you are picking up the cases and putting them onto the trucks. So it's not easy work. It can be back-breaking work, and you're talking Georgia, and the heat and the humidity, and stay away from Herman. Herman doesn't want any help, doesn't need any help. In fact, he has a nickname. We call him the Herminator around that place. But Herman passed away not too long ago, and he wanted to have his memorial service at Midwest Food Bank. So we set up the warehouse, had the memorial service there. It's a beautiful setting. And now when you come, we got a picture of Herman up on the board. His daughter is volunteering. She does a lot of the woodwork and the framing for us and some of the cooking for us. We have a cart that he used to use. He always wore a yellow bandana that's tied on there, and it's engraved Herminator on there to memorialize him that way.
Yeah, the story I've heard about Herman was that when he was carrying a box, you got out of his way.
Didn't get close. Even if you tried to help, offered to help, he was angry. Yeah.
And as I understand it, during the last years of Herman serving, he was pretty significantly ill. And he continued to serve just as long as he could. And of course, his strength waned over time. And as you mentioned, he did ultimately pass away. But, when you describe people like Herman, I have to look in the mirror and I say to myself, what's my excuse? Because, here's a guy that you might look at and say, oh, man, you've done your time. You should just take it easy and relax. And yet he's out there serving, and he's serving hard.
Yeah.
And it cost him something, but yet he loved it so much that he wanted like his remembrance to be at Midwest Food Bank.
That's exactly right. Herman's love was an example, I think, for all of us when we think about where to volunteer, how to volunteer. I know we all have the best of intentions, and I see a lot of wonderful volunteers here that help out at Midwest Food Bank, so I do appreciate that. But, frankly, for me, it was a great lesson, having been in the for-profit world, and it just seems like you're on the go all the time, and you're super busy, and everyone is taking your time. And you think, I really got to take some time to go volunteer, and it always just seems to be inconvenient, and or I got a call, I got a conference call, I got all those kind of excuses. And when I came to Midwest Food Bank, what a jaw-dropping experience that was for me, going from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world. I read a lot about moving from success to significance, and seeing people come in there. Some will work 40 hours a week. Some are working 2 hours, some maybe 2 hours a month. So it's a wide range of opportunities that we have at Midwest Food Bank, and I'm sure anywhere else in this community, because it's a wonderful community to have the food bank in. Believe me, just some terrific volunteers and donations.
You've talked about what the volunteer workforce that you have enables Midwest Food Bank to accomplish. You talked about the impact. But what's the impact that you've observed on those volunteers for taking the time to show up and serve? What happens in them?
Yeah, when you come in to volunteer, you come in with the thought of how you can give, and you leave realizing what you get. Because it's just simply amazing, the community that's in the Midwest Food Bank and the number of volunteers. And I know God brings volunteers in and out of our lives all the time. What the needs are, somebody shows up out of the blue. It's a role that we needed, and then they're gone again. Or the volunteers, it's not necessarily, the big impact isn't lifting that box of cereal onto the truck for the people in need. a lot of times it's that impact that volunteers have on each other and talking to each other and being there for each other and sharing experiences. So they often leave with that with a new experience that, wow, it wasn't just feeding 7 million meals, putting together food for 7 million meals, but the impact that you may have on somebody's life outside of the food bank.
Yeah, the way it seems to me is that, if you sign on to being a part of what God is doing to bless other people, yeah, you get blessed too.
Yeah.
You can't just, well, I guess one way to say it is you can't outgive God. You can't try to give somebody else joy without getting joy, just because that's the way that God works.
Yep. That's, I think that's a great lesson for us all. And we also have a Bible study there. We're having our third one, and very similar to what Pastor Matt was talking about in terms of the Easter experience. And we talk about, why am I called to serve? What purpose is that? Why even do that? And what's pretty neat is the Bible study that, with the Easter experience and looking at Jesus, and Jesus calling us to serve, to live like him. And when he's in the upper room, at the Passover, and he is cleaning the feet of those apostles that really are about to betray him. And those feet, I'm sure, are dirty, stinky, nasty feet. But he's doing that out of love and service, and we should be doing the same.
Well, friends, I'm going to ask Pat to hang here for a few minutes after the worship service. If you would love to come and ask him a question, if you would love to come just to get acquainted, if you're a regular volunteer at Midwest Food Bank, be sure and drop by to let Pat make the connection between your membership here and your service there. Would you again tell Pat, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
I learned about Herman a few days ago when Pat and I had the chance to talk. And that story has just stuck with me. The fact that Herman's place of serving Christ in the world was so dear to him that he wanted it to be one of the last things that people thought about when they thought about him. And that just really stirs me, friends. What do we want to be known for? How do we want to be remembered when our days are done? I get to read a lot of obituaries in my business. And it always strikes me as interesting how people describe the life of someone that they care about. What do you want your obituary to say? Do you want your obituary to say, he loved golf? Do you want your obituary to say, she loved flowers? I mean, there's nothing wrong with those things. But is that how you want to be remembered? People like Herman, people that truly listen to Jesus and do their best to follow him with all their heart and soul and mind and strength. Christ invites us to be darkness disruptors, to be people who change the world, to be people who make a difference. Isn't that what we want the last thing that's said about us to be? I know it is for me. And I sure do hope it is for you.